Hello everyone. So this is going to be the second video that I post in a short amount of time, which is a record. No, actually, the fact that I'm creating and going to post a second video is actually more significant to me than the first video I posted, only because that's been part of my loop over the years, creatively speaking. I will fall off the face of the earth, and then one day I'll gather my courage, be like, that's it, this is when I'm showing up in the world, I'm going to record a video, post it online, and then I promptly fall off the face of the earth for like another year or so. So I've done this. I'm sure if you look through the videos I've posted over the years, that's the pattern that's been perpetuating. So now I'm like, okay, you posted one, now post another. I also wanted to say thank you deeply to everyone who took the time to watch the video, took the time to comment on it, send me a message about it. The feedback was so beautiful. And the core theme of all the messages I've received was, I needed to hear this. Thank you for showing up. So I'm showing up again. And also, there is an incredible amount of people who are now picking up The Untethered Soul, either for the first time or again, or even, I know someone that actually went out to buy it. I feel like Michael Singer should give me maybe a sales commission. I'm just saying. So that was absolutely beautiful. I just came back from a 4.5 hour walk, an hour to the nearest conservation area. Then I did the whole perimeter of the park, then an hour back, and I feel so beautifully grounded, like especially in comparison to like my previous video. I was like super high energy, like bouncing off the walls, and like I know you can feel it. So it's nice that I'm still high energy, but I'm more grounded today. So that's nice. Not that I don't like the high energy states too, but it's good to flow through it, right? Anyways, yeah, what I'm thinking, honestly, I'm just gonna share some of the thoughts that have come from posting the first video. So for example, this is interesting. So in terms of what drove me to post that first video, it's so interesting. It was a pattern I discovered in myself, and how I discovered that pattern was really interesting. I started to notice, and this didn't happen that often, but it happened often enough that I realized it was a pattern happening. And the pattern was, I would be talking to someone, and either I couldn't get a word in, because if I went to contribute to the conversation, they would just completely check out, cut me off mid-sentence like I wasn't talking at all, and just go off on a totally different tangent. And I know they weren't doing that to be rude, it just literally felt like they couldn't hear me. And it started to happen so much that like even others began to notice that, in the middle of me saying something, people would just completely check out. And it happened 3 times in quick succession, I'd say within the span of like 2-3 weeks, something like that. So it was starting to happen more, and I was like, what's going on here? So here's the kicker. When that started happening more and more, I literally put the question out there. I'm like, okay, to the greater intelligence of life that is way, way bigger than I am, what's going on here? Why is it that all of a sudden people just don't hear me? And I looked online to see what people might be saying about that, just to get some ideas. And I was finding a lot of responses like, oh, well, maybe you're mumbling a lot. I'm like, come on. I'm relatively quite good at articulating myself. I don't think that's the issue here. I'm not afraid of projecting my voice. No. So anyways, I sat with it for a while until maybe 3 days later, 4 days later, something like that. There was a knowing that came through. And when I say a knowing, I'm saying it came from my gut rather than my mind. And the knowing that I got, it was out of the blue in the middle of my day. It was just like, it was like, people don't hear you. People don't listen to you because you don't feel worthy of being heard. And I could tell that there was a degree of truth to that for sure, because the moment I had that realization, and again, who knows, maybe that's not true. Maybe I'm making it up. Maybe it wasn't annoying. But what was important is that it drove me to consider it as a possibility. Like, yeah, maybe I don't feel worthy of being heard, and that's why I hide all the time, because it's just easier to do that. So posting that first video was my response to that possibility. Like, you know what? Yeah, maybe I don't feel worthy of being heard, so I'm just going to put myself out there and act like, yes, I am worthy of being heard. Even if it's, that saying, it's like, fake it till you make it, in that sense, when it comes to confidence. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to put myself out there. And there was also this realization that because of this belief that I was holding, the moment it popped up, it was like, that's not true. That is not true. You have so many examples of why that is not true. And I'm not saying I'm more worthy of being heard than any other person, but I am worthy of being heard. So that was a big part of my process. Something else I was thinking about loops in general, because some people in their comments or their messages to me would mention the loops that they're working through. And what I was realizing, so when it comes to the loops, all right, we're gonna go deeper into vulnerability here. Probably the biggest loop that I'm working through. Wow, it's amazing. I'm like standing here, like my heart's beating like crazy. One of the biggest loops that I'm working through is learning to balance my nervous system and learning to express my emotions in a healthy way, because when I don't, I have a deep compulsion to pick at the skin, which goes so badly with eczema. Like, it just feeds it. And it's something that I've been working through for 30 years. 30 years. Oof. It feels amazing to say this out loud right now. And because I've been working through it for so long, like, that's how deep it is. That's how deep it is. And that's part of my journey. What I'm learning through that can not only be applied to others who are struggling with the same thing, but anyone else that's having issues like keeping their nervous system balanced or expressing their emotions. So I'm stepping, like, I'm working through that big loop. And let's see here. When it comes to loops, and this is something that I'm working through with that pattern especially, noticing is the key. The goal is to identify the elements that make up the loop in terms of thought forms. So you have stories, the stories and beliefs that you hold, the emotional responses, the somatic sensations, and the inner and outer environmental cues. Like, I'm just going to give an example. Mirrors. Mirrors are not a good time for me, in the sense that this is an element of the loop. I go in front of a mirror and it's like, oh, I get really close. I'm like, okay, what imperfections are on my skin that I can go after? I can get trapped in a mirror for a long time before I'm like, okay, step back and free myself from it, right? Because what happens is when I go in that loop, there's a sort of trance effect, because the act of picking at the skin it's a self-soothing mechanism, right? So that was one element of the loop. So then it was like, okay, I'm going to start being aware of what happens when I'm in front of a mirror. Can I just not get close to the mirror and stay further back from it and just look at my face, look at my eyes, look at my smile, like, find some way to redirect that compulsion. And then as you dissect the loop, you can learn to attune to those more subtle layers of your experience of it. So what I started thinking about at that point as I was journaling is this book that's called The Gift of Our Compulsions. And I'm paraphrasing this, but at one point, what it basically explains is with a loop, when you first start working through it, chances are by the time you notice the loop, it's already done. And you're looking back at it, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that again. First of all, if you start going into guilt and into shame, that's it. You're gonna keep perpetuating it. So just watch it, just observe it. Noticing is key. Now, the more aware you become of it, at some point you might catch yourself in the middle of it. And I'm learning to do that. And sometimes I'm like in the middle of the process of like, wow, my skin's bothering me. I notice it and I'm like, okay, stop. And sometimes I'm successful. And I can like, okay, think about how good it's gonna feel if you just leave the skin alone, put some moisturizer on it, something along those lines. Sometimes it doesn't work, but I can notice it in the middle of it. And then eventually you get to a place where you start feeling it coming on. You start to notice the loop before it happens. And that's key, because eventually by becoming more conscious about the parts of the loop, you also become more conscious of the whole loop in general, whereas before you were unconscious of the entire loop. So that's the key, is just break it. Instead of being like, oh my God, I have this big loop, this big pattern in my life that keeps repeating. What are the elements that make up that loop? Focus on the elements, because once you start unlocking the elements, then you are able to release the loop at a higher level. So what happens is, as you become conscious of the whole loop, it expands your perception of it, your consciousness of it, until you are fully able to witness it, as opposed to being so narrowly focused on it that you're trapped in it. And this expanded view allows you to see the choices you are making that are perpetuating this loop, and you can exercise your will to deliberately step through resistance and make a different choice that will lead to a different outcome. So that's been so key, and not just that loop, but in all of the different loops that I'm working through, just like we're all working through different loops, right? Another one is my relationship with coffee. Oh my God, I love my coffee. I really love coffee. I love the ritual of it. I love the taste of it, the preparation of it, the sharing of it. I love a coffee in the morning. I love a coffee at night, when I'm driving, when I'm walking, when I'm writing. Like, when is not a good time to have a coffee? I've gone up and down over the years with coffee, where I can go, one moment I'm like, that's it, no more coffee. And then eventually it sneaks its way back in. It's like the lover you can't stay away from. They're not good for you, but you just can't help going back to them. And I've had times in my life where, especially when I was back at the office at my current job, we had an espresso machine. We had bottomless coffee everywhere. Whew, that was bad for me. I remember a period of my life where I was like probably 7-8 shots of espresso a day. Now, thankfully, I've gotten a lot better with my coffee intake. Way better. And it feels nice, because that's actually, now that ties in with the loop of the skin picking, because drinking too much coffee throws my nervous system out of balance. And then it's just like, oh, my whole nervous system is shaky and jittery. But here's the thing though, what I noticed is the story I was telling myself. Remember? There's the thought forms, the stories and the beliefs that come up. And what was happening is, with the coffee, the story was, well, if I drink coffee, it'll wake me up. So therefore, the more coffee I drink, the more awake I will be. First of all, it's true that if I drink some coffee, it'll wake me up a little bit. But if I truly pay attention to the way I feel before I drink the coffee and as I drink the coffee, if I'm going to be honest with myself, I probably need like a medium coffee at the most, and then I'm like, okay, I got the wakefulness of caffeine, right? Not 3 extra large coffees later. So I had to notice that story, realize it's not true by studying my direct experience of what happens when I drink coffee. What happens when I drink this much coffee versus this much coffee? What happens? So the more you study that direct experience, the more you get the feedback that you need in order to determine, like, is this a choice that's aligned with my best interests or is it not? So yeah, loops are an interesting thing, but it's really empowering when I was talking here about how the more conscious you become of it, eventually you are conscious enough of it that you can make a different choice. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. It can be just, this morning I feel really good energetically and I don't actually need a coffee. So I'm going to hold off. I'm not going to drink coffee right now. I'm just going to coast on this like fresh post-sleep energy that I've got. And maybe later in the day I'll feel for a coffee, but feeling in the moment like, do I want one, or am I telling myself that I want one? And then the moment you make that different choice, it is really empowering just by virtue of the fact that you made a different choice. You stepped into the unknown. You got off the same track you've been going over and over and over. So for whatever loop you might be going through, ask yourself, what is even a really small choice that I can make that's different than what I usually do that perpetuates that loop? And don't get me wrong, it is simple as I explain this. It's not easy. It is not easy. I get that. I honor that. It's a process, right? I've had some loops, like years and years of these loops, right? But I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to give up in changing them. Like when your nervous system is programmed a certain way through the thoughts that you think and the behaviors that you do and the emotions that you feel, it takes deliberate effort to do something different, to think something different. And what happens is as you unlock these new experiences of like, oh, you know what? I haven't drank a coffee like just last week. I'm like, you know what? I've been going pretty hard on the coffee. I'm going to slow it down. Today, I'm not going to drink any coffee. I just went one day without coffee, and I couldn't believe at the end of it just how relaxed and grounded I felt in my nervous system. And now it's not, and here's another thing. With the loops, I find that extremes don't work. So if I take, again, the coffee as an example, I would like swing to one end of the pendulum and be like, yeah, I love coffee. I want to be awake. I got lots of things to do this week, lots of work. So I'm going to drink a lot of coffee. What happens is then my nervous system goes totally out of whack, really jittery, really anxious. My liver does not like that. I start to see it in the eczema that starts to show up. So that's one extreme. Now, think of a pendulum. If you swing the pendulum all the way to one end, you are overdoing it with the coffee. Then my thought process was, that's it. Okay, no more coffee. And I would totally cut it out. But then here's the thing. I do love my coffee, right? So then I changed that approach. So rather than it being all or nothing, I started to do the work to develop a different relationship with coffee, a more conscious relationship with coffee, so that I can still enjoy it without overdoing it. Can I have just a little bit? Can I have a smaller amount throughout the day, or a smaller amount in that moment? Can I take a day's break? Tomorrow I don't have any work. I don't have anything, like it's an open day for rest and whatever it is that I want to do. Why would I necessarily, like, can I take a break of coffee for that day? Just be gentle with it. So, yeah, okay. Right now I'm feeling really, what's the word I'm looking for? I felt this natural sense of conclusion to this whole segment I just shared. I'm already at 20 minutes. That's amazing. I was just like, let's just record a short video, and here we are, 20 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to leave you with that. If you have, as you watch these videos, if you have any questions that come up, please feel free to send them my way. I actually have a couple of them that a friend has sent me, I won't even ruin them, but I'm going to be sitting with them and adding them to future videos, right? So, yeah, just wanted to share some of the insights that have helped me when it comes to loops, and just just dive even that deeper into vulnerability. And I hope it inspires you. I hope it inspires you to do the same. Vulnerability is so underrated, so powerful, because it's through your vulnerability that you can find your strength. Because if you're not afraid to be vulnerable, you won't have that armor up anymore. Like, oh, I gotta be strong and I gotta appear a certain way to people. Like, no, this is me. This is me in the raw. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna wrap this up now. Wishing you a beautiful evening. If you've watched this far, thank you for watching. If you've watched 10 seconds of this, well, you won't see this message now, but thank you for watching. I'm just putting that energy of love and gratitude out there. So, all right. Have a great evening.